Hi there, this is Tony from pianotone.ca, and this is my fourth video in my series on recording with the Yamaha PSR-E473 and PSR-EW425 keyboards. In this video, I'm going to be going over what I think are the most efficient steps to create a decent quality backing track using the multi-track MIDI song recording functionality on these keyboards. You already heard a bit of my finished backing track. It's for Let It Be by the Beatles. My backing track is going to be intended for a piano player, so it will include all instruments other than the piano. I'll be using a built-in style for the drums and the bass only. I'm going to record all the other instruments manually, including some custom drums for the intro and the ending, as well as playing something to kind of thicken up the background during the solo section so that when I use the backing track, I can play a piano solo and not have it sound too thin. So in order to keep this video from being unnecessarily long, I won't be going into a lot of detail on how to do all of this, since I've already covered all of that in detail in the first 3 videos in this series. So if you're not familiar with how to record multi-track MIDI songs or create custom percussion count-ins, intros, and endings on these keyboards, then please watch the first 3 videos in this series first and then come back to this one. The links for all those videos are included in the description below. So for this video, I'm going to explain each step, and then I'm going to talk about how that step played out for my backing track, and then I'll move on to the next step. And at the end of this video, I'm going to include myself playing along with the entire backing track, and then a copy of the backing track in its entirety for you to check out and even play along with if you like. There will be links to those sections in the description below, so you can jump straight to whatever section you want to. Okay, so with all of that out of the way, let's check it out. Okay, so step 1 is to know the song really, really well. If you want to avoid a lot of wasted time during this process, this is a super important step. Make sure you know your song inside and out, and that means you know the chord changes and you can play along with the actual song perfectly. And you also need to be able to play your piano part through the whole song just to a metronome. It doesn't have to be played perfectly, but it has to be arranged perfectly. I'm going to talk about this more in step 2. And this is the point where you want to start thinking about the arrangement details. You want to think about changes in intensity, the song's intro and ending. Is it a unique or a signature intro or ending that you care about trying to duplicate, or does that even matter to you? Or that can determine whether you need custom percussion intros and outros, or whether you can just use the built-in intros and endings on the keyboard. You also want to think about, are there any points during the song where you might need the style drums to stop and then restart so that you can do some custom percussion in the middle of the song. Okay, so for my step 1, this was actually the first song I ever learned on piano, and I've played it thousands of times, so I know the song very well. I plan on having a 1-measure count-in and then using some very minimal custom drums for a few measures before I have the style drums take over. And I'm also assuming that I'm going to need to do a manual drum ending to match the signature ending of the song. It goes like this. There's also another one of those in the middle of the song as well before the solo, and I'm not quite sure yet whether or not I'm going to try and stop and restart the style drums to manually do that one as well, but we'll get to that soon. Step 2 is to record a guide track. When it occurred to me to do this, it was kind of a eureka moment, and it made creating my backing track much easier and faster. I record my main piano part the way that I'm going to be playing it when I'm actually playing along with the finished backing track. This is the way I already know the song, and I'm already comfortable playing it. So once I record this part, it is far easier to record the other tracks, especially the style track. Even though I know the song really well, this still really helps me know exactly where I am in the song as opposed to trying to count measures or something like that. And I don't have to play this track perfectly because it won't be a part of the final backing track, but I do have to make sure it's arranged properly. So I got to make sure I've got the right number of measures in the start for the intro, make sure it's arranged properly, get the right chord changes at the right spots, all of that type of thing. I basically have to make sure that I structure the song correctly for this guide track that I'm making. Now, I would highly recommend that you do not record your guide track on track 1 since the style hasn't been recorded yet. If you saw one of my other videos earlier in the series, you'll know that when you record a style, it's going to also record over top of track 1 if you play any note on the right-hand side of the keyboard. So it can be very easy to accidentally overwrite your track 1 when you were recording the style track. So I'm going to record this guide track entirely on track 2. Then once you're further along in creating the other tracks, especially the style and the custom drumming, then you can get rid of this track and use it for something else. Okay, so for my step 2, I'm ready to record on user 1. I've got a clear empty track here. So I'm going to set the metronome to the correct tempo, which is 75. I've already actually done that. I'm going to turn the metronome on. And then I'm going to hold down record and hit track 2 to record to track 2. Then when I hit start to start recording, I'm going to wait that one measure, which is where I'm going to be putting in my custom count in later on. And then I'll start playing along with the backing track. Now note, you can't hear the metronome, but I can. Okay, so step 3 is to choose a style on your keyboard. Now, this can be time-consuming, especially if you're new to your keyboard, but it is worth it to spend time on this step. Don't just use the first one that seems to fit. Take note of it and then keep on testing others. So you want to go through the styles on your keyboard, and you can probably narrow the selection down using the categories and look for styles that might work. For each style that you're trying out, you want to set the tempo to your song's tempo, turn on the accompaniment, and check both the variations, so both variation A and B, and do test the intro and the ending. They probably won't work for your song, but if they do, awesome. This is also where it's up to you how important it is that that intro matches your song. If they're close enough, are you okay with it? If you can get away with using the built-in ones, it will save you some time later. And keep in mind two things with intros. Most of these on these keyboards are kind of long and also already include some riffs or changes that might conflict with what you're going to want to play in your intro. And also remember that if the drums work with what you want, but the accompaniment doesn't, you can actually mute everything but the drums during the intro and you can still use it. So don't immediately discount a style just because you don't like the instrument parts. Remember that the instrument parts can be revoiced or they can be muted entirely. Once you have it narrowed down to a couple of styles, even if you have just chosen one, test them out and make sure. This is where that guide track you made in step 2 can come in super handy. You can test or do a test recording basically of the style that you're considering over top of your guide track to see how the style sounds with the piano part you're going to be playing. So for my step 3, I started by just going through the ballad styles at the right BPM and just playing along. So I'd try all of these different ballad styles, set them to the tempo, and then I'd just, before I even try to record, I would just kind of play along with them to see how they sounded. Try the other variation. Then I'd move on to the next style and I'd try all the different ones out just to kind of see how they went. And keep in mind, you can mute stuff right down to the bass and the drums if you want. Then I did a test recording of the last two that I was deciding between to see how it sounded with my guide track. And I mostly listened to the drums and the bass because I was pretty sure I was going to want to record the rest of the accompanying instruments myself. But I did give the built-in ones a try. I did end up settling on number 62, which is Orc Rock Ballad, and because the bass really worked better for me in that. I also knew pretty quickly after testing the intro and ending that I wouldn't be using them. The intro needs to be really simple to my song, and the ending has that signature lick that I mentioned before that I wanted to get reasonably close to the actual song. So this is the one that I settled on. And I also was going to be playing it just with the bass and the drums. So step 4 is determine what style parts to mute and when to mute them. Now that you've chosen a style, take note of whether you are muting style parts and when in both variations, and whether you are keeping but revoicing any style parts to a different instrument. You might be turning style parts on or off during the song. You might even be muting drums partway through the song for a break, or you may just be letting the style go untouched. So for my step 4, I knew from the start that I was only going to be using the drums and the bass because I wanted to manually play the other instrument parts. And for the intro, I knew I wanted a 1-measure count in. Then I went through the song and decided at what point my style should start. I decided to have the bass join first, right after the first chorus, and then to have the drums join in after the third verse finishes. Then I had a decision to make. That signature line at the end of the song is also played after the second chorus. Played twice leading into the solo, so I tested it out with drums and bass. The bass didn't match really well with what I was playing, so at first I thought I needed to mute both the drums and the bass, but then I thought, try it with just the drums. And then when I did that, the drums worked fine with it. I only needed to mute the bass for that part because it conflicts with the signature line that I wanted to play. This is great news because now I can just mute the bass and then unmute it as the solo starts. I'll need to play a manual bass in its place and that matches my signature line, so that will take up another track, but that's okay. And I can do this again at the end of the song, although at the end of the song I have to keep in mind I'm also going to have to mute the drums cleanly after that last measure. Then I can add a simple cymbal crash or something at the very end of the song. Okay, so step 5 is to record your style. This is, at least for me, because I'm not really an arranger keyboard player, the most challenging and most time-consuming step. Because these keyboards do not have punch in and punch out, where you can start recording partway through a song if you make a mistake, you have to get every track recorded perfectly. And recording the style means you have to perfectly nail all the chord changes, the changes between variations A and B, when to start and stop the style, and when to unmute and mute the style parts. Also, when to trigger a style intro or ending if you're going to be using them. And I will say it again, my guide track from step 2 made this step way easier. So I do want to note something that I wanted to share here. If you only mute all the in-use style parts for variation A, so just the ones that are in use for variation A, because it's not necessarily using all of the tracks. So for example, if I go to the style, you can see track 6 isn't in use in variation A. So if I go and I mute all of them down to just the drums and the bass, and then I switch to variation B, you're going to see this number 6, which is in use in variation B, actually pops up. So I need to go to variation A and variation B and mute everything that I want to mute before I get started. Now when I switch back to variation B, you can see that track 6 is muted. Okay, so my step 5, I did get it recorded pretty quickly, mostly with the help of that guide track. I had to wait the correct number of measures, then add in the bass, which is partway through the song, and then start playing the chord changes so that the bass changes happen. And then I added in the drums at the right spot. Then I muted the bass for that signature lick and left the drums going before the solo. And then I unmuted the bass as the solo started. And then at the end of the song, I muted the bass again for that signature lick, and then successfully stopped the drums right at the end for the final measure. Now, a lot of these changes happen quite a ways into the song, so I'm not going to bother demonstrating it the way I actually ended up recording it. But just to give you a quick idea, I've got a couple of measures of my guide track recorded here. So I'm just going to record basically what I did to show you how I did it, but it does happen in the actual backing track quite a ways further into the song. I'm going to go to Style. I'm going to mute all of my drum parts. Turn the metronome on, and I'm going to hit record. And I'm going to hit play, and I'm going to wait that one measure. Then you'll hear my guide track coming in. I'm going to unmute the bass. Then I'm going to start it on the next measure. And on the next one, I'll unmute the drums. Missed a chord change there, but that's okay. So step 6 is to record your custom percussion track. So count in, intro, ending, any extra fills, that kind of thing. So I'm going to just be doing a very simple count in on some drumsticks or hi-hat or something. So I'm going to pick a kit. And I'm going to use the one that is actually used in my style so that it sounds the same. You can actually find this by going to your style and then holding shift and then pressing drums, and then it's going to tell you what the voice is. Unfortunately, it doesn't give you the number. I don't know why they do that. It just says power kit. but I know after having done this a bunch of times that I can go find Power Kit. So I'm going to go to my main voice. And I'm going to scroll up to 295, which is Power Kit. So here's where you need to plan out all your drum parts. So you want to figure out what keys play what drums, practice your manual drums, playing along with the style you just recorded. If you look online for the Yamaha PSR-E473 data list on Yamaha's site, it will show you all the drum kits and what keys play what drums. So for my step 6, given that I was able to use the built-in drums for those signature licks, made my life much easier. I recorded a count-in with drumsticks, then the first 3 verses, and first chorus, I just placed a closed hi-hat on straight beats. For the next 2 verses, I switched to alternating closed and open hi-hats, and then for the next chorus, I unmuted the style drums, and then just let them take over. And then I did even add some extra cymbal crashes during the signature lick right before the solo, as well at the end of the song. So I'm just going to quickly demonstrate how I recorded the custom drums. Would just basically pick a track to record them to, and then I would make sure I turned on the metronome so that I could nail that count in with the drumsticks. And then I think my hi-hat was right there. So I'm going to record my custom drums. Now that I've got the style recorded, it's safe to go ahead and use track 1. So I'm just going to record to track 1. I'm going to make sure I turn the metronome on. And then this time, instead of hitting play to start recording, I'm actually going to listen to the metronome and then hit the first beat of my count-in. You can hear my guide track comes in. And I actually did have hi-hat here. Oops. So step 7 is take a look at your remaining tracks and plan out what you want to record in them and just go do it. Once you reach this step, the rest is going to happen quite a bit quicker and easier. You've finished the hardest part of this process, which is the style and the drums. Now that your percussion and style tracks are all done, you can plan out what other instrument tracks you're going to want to record to spice up your backing track, and keep in mind that you also have that guide track slot available as well. You want to keep the guide track around as long as possible to help you do the recordings, but then if you want to use that track for something at the very end, then you can do that. So my step 7, I've already got pretty much planned out what extra tracks I want to include. I needed a track for a bass guitar to match the signature spots where I muted the bass so I could manually play and match that signature lick better. So I looked up the bass from the style, which is number 89, fingered bass, and I used that. Now, I do need a track for some type of strings or choir voice to try and match some of the backing vocals that are in the song. I ended up using octave choir voice number 223, which is this one. And something to note here, you cannot edit the relative volumes of these tracks once they're recorded, or if there is a way to do that, I haven't figured it out yet. So make sure you adjust your voice volume relative to the other parts before recording your track. The octave choir was way too loud. So for example, that's basically what I was going to be doing in the chorus, but I actually had to edit the volume of that down to about 50 instead of 110, which is where it was at, to keep it from overpowering everything else. Then I also needed a track to fill in the solo section. I was originally going to play an electric piano or just a piano here, but since I'm going to be soloing with a piano voice, I chose a brass section instead. I chose voice number 130, which is the live brass section. And I also included that at some of the choruses at the end of the song to help build to the ending. But I did have to decrease the volume of that as well because it was quite loud. And then once I lose the guide track, that left me with one more track, and I decided to use it for an electric piano, so I just used my favorite, which is number 13, the cool suitcase electric piano. And I used that to double up the signature lick just to kind of fill it out. So I added in fill in what I was playing on the piano. And I did also have to, as you can probably tell, because that was quite loud, I had to decrease the volume of that voice as well. Now, do note that you can actually record two different voices on the same track if you want to, as long as the two voices aren't playing at the same time. And you've got, as long as you've got enough time to switch between them. You could use registrations to speed that up if you needed to. I did try this with a few combinations without success because I couldn't switch voices fast enough. It always ended up being that I had to switch from one to the other immediately. But I did have enough tracks anyway, so I didn't worry about it. Okay, so after all of that, I'm suddenly done. I'm going to play through the whole track in a bit, but let's just assume I've tested playing along with it and I'm happy. So next thing I want to do is back up my work to a USB flash drive. To do that, I hold down Shift and press Function. And that gets me to the File Control menu. Then I want to scroll to Save SMF, which is Save Standard MIDI file, and then I'm going to hit Enter. Now it's going to ask me what song I want to record, so it's user 1. That's the one that I was working on. So then I hit Enter. And then it's going to give me a default song name. It's basically song, and then the next number that's available on the flash drive. So I can hit Enter, save OK, yes. Now I've got that on my flash drive. Now I could actually rename that song by connecting the flash drive to my PC, put the flash drive back in the keyboard, and it's going to name and you'll see the name of the song as you renamed it. So for example, if I go to song, you can actually see that's my actual backing track that I've created that I've renamed. Okay, so now I've got a backup of the MIDI song. Now I could always just use the MIDI version on my backing track for a performance, either the original one on my keyboard or the one on the flash drive, and play along with that. But I would much rather have an audio file so that I can then play along with the backing track on any keyboard. So to do that, I was originally hoping to be able to just use the audio record function, which records audio files, and then have it record the playback of the backing track. But I can't access both of those features at the same time. So I can't play back a MIDI song and record it to an audio recording. So instead, I'm going to use the USB to host port with a USB cable and a lightning adapter, and then I'm going to connect to my iPad or iPhone. Then I can actually use any app that records audio. I could add an audio track to GarageBand. I could even use the built-in Voice Memos app. But I'm going to use a free app called Voice Record Pro. This app has a lot of cool features, and I may do a review on it, but that's for another day. Okay, so before I include a clip of me playing along with the backing track and then play the backing track on its own so you can play along with it if you want to, I thought I'd finish up the talking section of this video and say thanks for checking the video out. I will have one more video in this series on recording with the Yamaha PSR-E473 and EW425 keyboards, which will be on different ways to record audio files. And with those, you can include vocals, so super cool. Once that video is done, I will add a link to the description below. And there are already links to the first 3 videos in this series, as well as links to some piano training I recommend, as well as my first original song on piano, Walk With You. So thanks again for checking this video out. If you like the content, please smash the like button and subscribe to my channel. That does really help me out. So now stay tuned for me playing along with the backing track, and there is a link in the description to skip to the section where you can play along with the backing track if you want to give that a try. And for that section, I'll include a screen recording showing the lyrics and the chords scrolling by in Songbook Pro to help you play along. So thanks again for checking this video out, and have an awesome day.